As I pondered through the list of the names of the people who succumbed to their own inner demons or external calamity following the Trans Day of Remembrance gathering, I couldn't help but be drawn into some deeply buried memories of my own. In the context of being an out and proud, gainfully employed, transitioning woman at nearly 40 years old, I feel immensely blessed for how life has been going. The time period was 2003, and I was coming from missionary upbringing of my parents on the Pacific island of Guam. Being raised on a tropical island in the mid-90s was certainly something I remember fondly. As a teenager, I felt it was a good place to be. I had friends. My parents' fellow co-workers had similarly aged and relatable families that lived in the same neighborhood. It was nice to have relatable friends for once in my life. When I lived in Virginia, I was introverted and I didn't have much of a friend base. I had lots of hobbies, lots of schoolwork, a few extracurricular activities to keep things rounded out. My sister and I often took similar courses of activities, whether it was gymnastics, cartooning, watercolor, sketching, swimming. She took karate, I did not. I did model aircraft, model railroading, and she did not. We both rode bikes, a pretty fair amount. Being raised without being told something was off limits per my gender was something that I am grateful for. Many of my friends through the years did not have that freedom to explore activities from a neutral eye. When we got to the island neighborhood, I had a few girlfriends and a few boyfriends. It felt like a balanced group. When I spent ample time with the boys and got along, all right, it felt more like an obligation to relate to them. They did the typical male things. Crudeness, although not very, brutish things like wrestling. In my family, my sister and I would wrestle and it was not a big deal. In fact, my sister was considerably better and stronger than I was at it. Some of it was karate background, some of it was the fact that at that point I wasn't very motivated to do it. Quite frequently, as a smaller kid, my response was not to fight back and ask for help instead. Sometimes my mother would encourage me to fight back. Just didn't feel like it. Rather, I would find myself trying to facilitate peace and reconciliation amongst my friend base. Even as a 12-year-old, as my boyfriends grew to be more masculine, I didn't. All of us liked doing rollerblade hockey. We did a ton of it. At one point, we would do even as much as 3 hours a day of it. We would bike as a group and increasingly on my own. I found my girlfriends increasingly more relatable. One in particular fit that mold exceptionally well. We would do anything and everything outdoors together. Bike, hike, sit on a hill and talk. A lot of sitting in trees talking, or sitting on a rock outcropping outside the neighborhood that overlooked a swamp and the coastline. We would call that spot the Cliff. It was a much smaller place than it felt to 13-year-olds. It felt like Pride Rock in The Lion King. Being able to look at the neighborhood on one side and the coastal sunset on the other was special. It was relaxing. When the boys were there, it was hide and seek. Some would paintball, sometimes we would laser tag. When it was just me and her, we would sit and talk. There was no romance in our minds that I was aware of, merely a social spirit in a kindred spirit kind of way. Yet as a byproduct of our contexts, her parents being a bit stricter than mine, things changed. One day she told me we couldn't be alone anymore. The explanation seemed as confusing to her as to me as she told me. We can no longer be alone together because of what boys and girls do together. I looked confused. We talk a lot? She shrugged. I don't really know either, other than it seems like a big deal. You know, make-out stuff. We were around 14. I had barely realized there was a physical difference between my nerdy, underdeveloped boy body and her similarly sized but very slender girl body. My asexuality had not yet been realized, but in hindsight, it makes perfect sense now. Yes, I indeed felt an attraction, but attraction is different from sexuality. The two things began in my mind at that point in time. One was that I felt like I had been cut off from a source of belonging in a very artificial way. It wasn't that she wanted it to happen, and neither of us understood why or how to really work through it. The relationship dynamic changed considerably as we couldn't do what we normally did, and she didn't know how to include me in what I didn't know how to ask for. The other, as I began the thought process of how are girls different? I knew I wasn't relating to the boys internally. Sure, I could get along, but I felt like I was more existing among them. I didn't feel like I was one of them. As pubertal development continued, I realized more and more the differences that were out of my control. Strength was handy. Getting male development, not so appreciated. I did not fully know what a girl looked like down there, but I knew what I had was not what my brain was programmed for. It was like constantly having a ghost program giving error codes in my mind, but it was so hard to ignore it. I would have loved for that to have disappeared. It didn't. On the outside, I was told how much of a model boy I was, how apparently I played the role well, making the best of it. I went on to get into mountain bike racing, and it proved to be a continuing passion for over 20 years now. In fact, a sport that gave me release in the worst of times. Eventually, as I began to understand some things deeper, my friend who was my neighbor moved away. We were 16 at that point. Not only did she move away, she moved to Africa. Wasn't meant to be, I reassured myself. Often I wondered what if I had figured out how to tell her that I wasn't a boy inside. Would I have been rejected for being weird? Would our parents have gone ballistic over that? Nobody would find out. It was only a couple years left until college anyway. Just keep going on. Being a guy for now. Get the work done. Ride the miles, race the races, keep on. College came. My parents gave me a deal that they would pay tuition if I went to at least 1 year of Bible college first. I picked Lancaster Bible College because it seemed like a good one for a missionary kid to go to. I certainly didn't understand fully what the terms of engagement would be for a person like me. Lots of hoops, interviews, referrals, writing projects, and tests. I got in nevertheless, and the first semester was all right. Easy academically and all right socially. Definitely didn't relate to most of the boys in my all-boys dorm floor because it was all segregated. Wrestlers, jocks, masculinity. A small group of boys on the floor didn't fit that description, and those were my true friend base. We would do the usual college things of playing Age of Empires or Combat Flight Simulator until entirely too late at night. We would sit in the lounge and play Halo on the Xbox, which I do terribly at gun games, always have, or Fusion Frenzy. In that game, I was always the blue girl character because why not? Then I decided to research my mental condition. Was it a condition? I thought so. What would it be called? Gender issues, sexuality issues, sexual disorder, sexual perversion, transvestitism. Oh, transgender. After a couple days of finding out that I had a real condition on the school network, I got a summons to the dean's office. As I sat down across from the dean, he reads off a list of search histories and says those are a problem on the school network. He asked me if there was anything that we needed to talk about. As he talked, I got the notion that if I said yes, it would just end up in another prayer session or some sort of list of verses to try to convince me that I would be under the influence of a demon of some sort. It wasn't that I disrespected him, quite the opposite. I did not feel vulnerability would be helpful at this point in the struggle. In fact, my internal struggle was not a struggle against myself as much as trying to understand myself. God doesn't make mistakes, right? I heard that all my life. Honestly, I think that's a great sentiment, and I wish his believers believed that. Like, really believed it. If it is good and holy, it comes from God, and if it has glitches and defects, it comes from the devil. That always seemed weird and quite arbitrary. If we have to spend so much of our existence in defiance of what we were created as, how much time and energy is wasted in that pursuit? Rather increasingly, I felt the societal mold was what was failing me. The mold of conservative Christianity. I didn't dislike my courses. I didn't completely like all of them, but who likes all of their college courses? By the end of the second semester and a summer semester, I still didn't manage to graduate, but I don't regret the effort. The friends that I made at that point are still friends that I still have 20 years later. It was, however, the time period immediately following that things took a much harsher turn. As a part of my plan, I went from there up to a small aircraft mechanics school in Quakertown, Pennsylvania. It was well regarded in the aviation community for its academic standards and hands-on standards. They were not wrong in that regard. Since I knew nobody in Quakertown or a radius of 100 miles or more from there, I went on a referral to an older couple's house that was referred by a friend. They had a little house and I would rent a room. Seemed like a good deal for the money. 5-mile bike ride to class, back roads, enjoyable ride. That area was interesting and not unsafe to wander on a bike, and wander I would. Many times I would get out of class and ride a couple of hours. Not much else to do but enjoy the scenery and burn off some energy. Within the first month, I was out on such a ride and the wife of the house decided to get into cleaning, as she often did. It was one thing to do a room service style clean. She did that fairly often. Whatever. That day I came home, and she had gotten clothing out of one of my backpacks, apparently to do them too. The issue was that bag was the one that I had my girl clothing in. In an effort to explore my identity, I had a small collection that I could be subtle and wear under normal clothing, since my normal clothing was in fact Mrs. Clothing anyway. When I came home, I was met by the husband of the house. He has me sit at the kitchen table while his wife has a very concerned expression on her face. "So we found you have girls' clothing and accessories," he says in a rather judging tone. My heart sank. "Why were you in my stuff?" I asked. "That doesn't matter right now," he replied. "Why would you have girls' stuff?" "Because I am a transgender person. I am a trans woman, a girl. That stuff is mine and nobody else's." I said, in an increasing authority, "Why would I not own up to it?" "No, you are not. That is not something that is real. To claim such is against God's plan for us. That is only lies. We cannot have lies in our household. To tell you anything different from what I said would be a lie. We cannot have this in our household," he said firmly but calmly. "I will have to ask you to leave. You have 2 days to be out." But I have nowhere else to be, and nobody else in this town," I said in a scared tone. "That doesn't change it. The decision is final." I didn't take 2 days to move out. I didn't have much stuff at that point. Some bikes, some boxes. I stuffed it all in my truck, took some to my grandparents for storage. What would I tell the family? I couldn't tell the truth. I don't know. How would anyone react? So far, I had been rejected or punished by anyone so far who found out. Nobody can find out. We had a disagreement. That's all I would say. The thing is, now I was living in my truck. Eventually, I asked the farm that I was working weekends at next to my grandparents' house if they had a connection. The place wouldn't be ready for 2 weeks, though. 2 weeks where I would have to live in the truck, going from parking lot to parking lot each night. Eventually finding the airport where the school was to be the safest place to rest. It was summer, the temperature was warm. Sleeping in the truck wasn't that big a deal. I would do it fairly frequently at bike race trailheads, since driving the night before was better anyway. The difference was that now I had a few more boxes, and it wasn't in the safety of a group of friends. On at least one occasion, I had to rise to my feet and honk the horn because I heard voices coming up to look at my stuff. Finding people within a 10-foot radius of everything you hold dear is a threatening and very nerve-wracking experience. To an extent, I believe that was where I learned my insomnia habits. It was only 2 weeks, which is a far cry from what some of my trans sisters have gone through, but it was enough for me. Many of us go through months or years of getting ostracized from society or family for little more than saying mom, dad, I'm actually a girl inside. I didn't miss a day of school. I wasn't going to let it win. Then school became increasingly worse. Even though I didn't aim to let anyone see the inside of me, I was still a girl existing inside a misogynistic, transphobic, homophobic pack of men inside of what looked like a man's body. That life of subversion is stressful, truly stressful. What if someone else would find out? Eventually, one of the male pigs decided that I was apparently gay. Why not let him think that? The farthest thing from the truth, in fact. When I can't stand being a boy, and the thought of being with these boys, and many of whom were 30 or 40 years old, made me want to throw up. They literally prided themselves on how crude they could be. Every day, Jerry Springer was on the lunchroom TV. The only person that I could stand in my class was a rather effeminate-feeling Jehovah's Witness boy. He was barely graduating high school, VOTEC program, but the two of us together passed pretty well as gay. We were good friends for a long time. He was my only friend in the whole town. It meant that now we were both contaminated. Nobody would come near us, but that was more a feature than a bug. They would still break my stuff. They still mocked us. They still stole my bike every chance they would get. They would still inflict as much emotional suffering on a daily basis as they could. No matter how many times I told the professors and teachers, they would just say, that's how it is. Nobody corrects it in the working world, so deal with it. To a degree that has been true. It didn't, and it doesn't have to be, though. After 2 years of putting up with that and trying to find a way, I finally got an audience with the headmaster. When I conveyed what had transpired in the last 2 years, he was distraught. He was crying. It amazed him nobody handled it. Then he said, I have full rights to involve as much police action as I saw fit, and he would back it. For once, somebody was on my side. Go figure. Walking out of his office, I would get to test that. A classmate was walking away with my bike. Mind you, every day I rode 12 miles each way because I couldn't afford gas. I turned back, and he turned back when I approached. Oh, I was just returning this, he tried to cop out. I took it from him and got within inches of his face in an empowered tone that I had not let anyone see in the whole time of being in this place. In a low mumble growl with narrow eyes, I know exactly what you were doing. I don't care what you say. I don't care what you are trying to do. I don't care who you are trying to impress. You tell whoever you want to that I was just in a meeting with the headmaster. He gave me the authority to involve police on you and whoever else is related to touching my stuff, my being, or harassing me. It is not cool. It is not a joke. And if you do even one more time, I will have you removed from this school, willingly or by force. Are we clear? He was cowering away. Why did I have to take 2 years to get there? Because I was raised to be better than them, not to fight like them. It still felt dirty to stoop to that level. It was not where I wanted to be. It was, however, taking back power from oppression. I still couldn't let them see me for me. That wouldn't happen for many years. On this day of remembrance, I remember how many times I felt like the harassment, the abandonment, the mistreatments, and abuses could have been too much. Even if they wouldn't have been the cause of it ending, I could have been attacked brutally in the process of people trying to steal the stuff from my truck. Many ways, under each of these circumstances, the story could have gotten much worse or even ended. Now, 2 years after beginning a fully out and public transition, where an overwhelming majority of people have been supportive friends, it is still a raft of emotions to think about. It puts into perspective how much of a knife's edge some of us live on. If we didn't have the support of people around us, there are many things that could drive a gender diverse person to suicide or harm. Depression, drugs, bad crowd can all end it way too easily. I'm grateful that I am blessed enough to have made it. Grateful that my journey has helped others, and hopeful that we can work forward to helping those less fortunate to survive as well. No, I am not a mistake. I am a beautiful, complex, and diverse child of God. Signed, Sarah Beth Jocelyn White.